Hello, good morning, everyone. So basically, today's lecture is a continuation from the lesson that we had last week. It is pretty much the same. So if you already understood the basic principles of shape grammar in the previous lecture, so you won't have any problem understanding today's lecture. Okay, so like last week, I've taught about the single rule shape grammar. Okay, so where you only have one shape rules, and then using that one rules to produce multiple designs, okay, in the same language of designs. Okay, so for today, I'm going to show you how you can produce shape grammar with more than one shape rules, and how can you can create a design using the rules that you have produced. Right? Okay, so basically in shape grammar, there are two types of rule application. The first one is addition rules, and the second one is subtraction rules. Right? The examples that I've shown last week, I believe, are mostly addition rules, where you add shapes, you add new shapes to the original shapes, right? Um, okay, so as I mentioned here, the rules add new objects to the initial object and the subsequent objects. So meaning that as long as you apply the rules to the matching shape, matching as the original shape, um, then you can create your designs. It can be applied in any shape grammar, meaning that doesn't matter whether it's a single rule shape grammar or multiple rule shape grammar, or 2D shape grammar or 3D shape grammar. So you can apply to all the different shape grammar that you are doing. So if you look at the examples on the right, okay, so the first one, you have a rectangular shape, and then you the rule these are the rules only. Okay, so basically these are rules. It's not a design process yet. So the first one, you can see that you have the rectangular shape, and then the rule specifies that you add another rectangular shape, but you rotate 90 degrees and you overlap uh, on the original object. So it becomes overlapping rectangular shapes. And as I mentioned last week, eventually you have created 4 smaller rectangular shapes, where you can also apply the same rules to the smaller shapes. Okay. Then the second one, the triangular shape. Um, so you can also add new shape, a different shape, okay, different from the original shape. So as you can see, the original object is triangular. It's a triangle, and then the rule specifies that you add a square, okay, and then you attach next to the triangle, right? So in the design process, in the design development process, as long as you can see that triangle, okay, doesn't matter whether eventually the size becomes smaller, just like the first rule. You can add the square at the appropriate position. Okay, if you still remember last week, I mentioned basically the rules cannot be applied in reverse. Wait, let me show you. Okay, so last week I mentioned if you have this kind of shape rules, right? So you can see that this is the triangle, and then you add the triangle to the side, okay, to the side of the you add the square to the side of the triangle. Okay, let me take the marker. Okay, like this. But along the way, when you proceed with the design development, so suddenly you have the triangle. Oops, it's too big. So let's say this is the triangle. So you can only add the square to this side. Okay, you cannot add the square to this side, right? Because it is already different. If you add to this side, as if the rule is something like this. So it is like a mirror object of the actual rules. So you cannot do that unless if it is an equilateral triangle, as I mentioned last week. So where all the sides are the same, okay, same length. So you can look at the object from different angles. So you can look at it from this way, you can look at it from this way, and you can look at it from this way. So if the rule is something like this, and then it is possible for you to have a variation like like this, or like this, or like this. Okay, but for this kind of triangle where only the two sides are the same, right? Um, you cannot apply the same principles, right? Because if you put the A label, right? Oops. So if you put the label, yeah, so if you put the A label like this, right? So that's the only configuration you can have. You cannot put the A on this side, okay? Because if you put A on this side, the object is actually like this, right? So you need to try to understand that. So I know sometimes it might be difficult for you to understand what I'm trying to say, right? But you cannot simply mirror the rule application, right? To have um, an appropriate design. Okay, and then the next one is addition rules applied to a three-dimensional shape grammar. Okay, uh, you just simply add a box on top of the corner of a box, and then at the bottom there you have also a box, and then the additional shape is actually is a different box, a box in a different size. Okay. So similar for number three, right? For if you look at this um, example here, example number three here. If you look at the box, okay, so basically the box has okay, I have the design development here. Okay, so if you look at this example, as you know that the box has how many similar sides? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, six uh, similar sides. So it doesn't matter where how you look at it. Right? So the box would still look the same. So for example, like if you um, sorry about that. Okay, so if you look at it from this way, from this angle, it still look the same. If you look at it from this, hmm, okay, still the same. Look at it from this way, still the same. Or if you look at it from below, it is still the same box. Okay, so it doesn't matter how which orientation that you look at the object. Okay, you still get the same um, orientation. I mean the same shape. Right. So the rule specifies that you just add another box on the side. Okay, so as you can see, the box has six similar sides and how many edges? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, 12 similar edges. Sorry, is it? Sorry. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so 12 similar edges. So meaning that you have a possibility of adding the new shape to all the 12 edges, because it doesn't matter how you rotate the object, so it still look the same. Okay, so when you develop the design, so you start with the box here and then you add on top. Okay, so basically if this is the original orientation that you look at, then you add that box. And then now to add this box, basically you look at this orientation, then you add to that position. Okay, and then after that, okay, so for this one also, you look at this position, then that's how you get this, right? So, but basically that's on the same plane. So now, basically, if you look at let's say the one at the bottom here, you look at it from this side. Okay, you look at it from this side, and you apply the rules, you'll get the one at the back there, right? Understood? And then if you look at the object from this side, okay, and then you apply the rule, then you get this shape over here. So you add that shape over there. Okay, so you keep on applying the rules again and again. Okay, you create a different design. So you can call this one design, and you can add more. You can apply more the rules more to get a different arrangement, right? Okay, so the second type of rule application is subtraction rules. Okay, so as the name suggests, basically you subtract an object, right, from the original, okay, original shape or original object. So the rules that subtract objects during the design development process usually apply in shape grammars with more than one shape rule together with addition rules. Right? So the addition rules basically, as I mentioned, you can just apply in any kind of shape grammar, be it single rule or multiple rules, 2D or 3D, doesn't matter. But subtraction rules can only be applied uh, to in a shape grammar with more than one shape rule. So uh, just imagine if, let's say, you only have one shape rule and it is a subtraction rules. Okay, so you start with okay, let's say lah, you start with this shape. I mean the rules is this. This is the rule. Oh, sorry. That's not appropriate. Okay, just imagine you have this rule. Okay, so you have like this overlapping equilateral triangle, and then the rule specifies that you remove this part here. Okay, you remove that triangle, so you only have this triangle. So you just imagine that if this is a single rule shape grammar, meaning that you don't have any other rules to develop the design. So when you begin the design process, you start off with this star shape, and then you apply the rules. It becomes like this. And then that's it. Nothing else. You cannot do anything else because this shape is already different from the rules, right? So you cannot apply any other rules to this shape. Okay, so that's why the subtraction rules only works with shape grammar with more than one rules. No? So it doesn't work in a single rule shape grammar. But now imagine that this is one of the rules. Rule number, let's say this is rule number 2. Okay. Um, Rule number 1 is is this. Right. So basically, it's something reverse now. So you have two rules. So this is rule number 1, rule number 2. So rule number 1, you have a triangle, and then you apply rule number 1. Basically, you add another triangle in a different orientation to the original triangle. So you get a star shape. And then rule number 2, you have the star shape, and then you remove one of the triangle. So in the design process, basically what's going to happen, so you start off with the triangle. Okay, you apply the rule once, you get this, right? And then what else? Sorry, I think this one also doesn't work because in the end, when you apply the rules, right? So once you have applied the rules here, you'll get that. And then if you apply rule number 2, then you get back to this. So no point doing that, right? So later on, I will show you more examples, but this two combination doesn't work with only two rules. So at least you need to have another rules, okay, rule number 3 perhaps, where you have another arrangement. So let's say from here, you add another triangle on that side. Okay. So you need at least 3 for this kind of shape grammar. You need at least 3 different rules, okay, to make the design interesting and to make it work. So if not, if you only have these 2 rules, then you're not going anywhere. Okay, so you just keep adding and subtracting, without creating any interesting design or interesting shapes. Okay, so if you look at the examples, of shape rules, right? So if you get an example of shape rules, subtraction rules. Okay, so basically on the left, you're going to have more things going on. Okay, for example, like this overlapping rectangular shape. And then you apply the rule. So after, the rule specifies that you remove this vertical rectangular shape from this original shape. Okay? So it becomes only single horizontal rectangular shape. And then this one, originally you have this triangle and a square, and then the rule specifies that you remove the square and you just leave the triangle. And then this one, you have this combination, and then you apply the rule where you remove one of the square or box, and then this one is the same. So you have this combination, and then the rule specifies that you remove the longer box here from the arrangement. Okay, let's look at one example of subtraction rules in two rule shape grammar. Okay, so as you can see, there are two shape rules. Rule number 1 is addition, and rule number 2 is subtraction. So rule number 1, basically you add rectangular shape to the original in different orientation. You add to the original shape. Originally is horizontal, then you add a vertical rectangular shape. Then you overlap with the original shape. And then rule number 2, you already have this arrangement, and then you remove the vertical rectangular shape, and you just leave the horizontal rectangular shape. So in the design development process, basically it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you want to use rule number 1 or rule number 2, right? As long as you have the matching shape in the design development. So first you start off with the original shape here, the initial shape, horizontal rectangular shape. So because the shape is like this, you don't have any option than to use rule number 1, right? Because rule number 2, you need to have this shape to apply the rules. But initially you don't have that shape yet, so you only have this horizontal rectangular shape. So you can only apply rule number 1. So you apply rule number 1, then you create this, and then from here you have options whether you want to apply again rule number 1 to any of these smaller rectangular shapes, or you want to apply rule number 2 where you subtract the vertical rectangular shape. But if you use rule number 2 here, basically here in the third stage, you're going to get back to this because you already removed the vertical rectangular shape. So on the third step here, you apply again rule number 1 to the smaller rectangular shape, right? So you apply to this side, then you apply to this side, you get this. Then from here only you apply rule number 2, where you subtract. So what do you subtract actually? So basically you are subtracting this okay. So in this case, the subtracted part is here. Okay. So you subtracted, not you lah. I have subtracted that two rectangular shape, right? So that's the use of subtraction rules. Then from there, basically you can have a different design. You can have multiple choice or multiple a variety of design that you can produce using these two rules. Okay, so you can have this. Okay, so basically the first, the one at the bottom there, it becomes like this by subtracting this shape, right? And this is it. Is it? Yeah, so originally you're gonna have something like this, okay, but you subtracted the one in red, so you only left with the white lines. Okay, and then in a different design, you subtracted different part. You can subtract different parts of the shape, so it becomes like this, and this one also the same. So you subtracted. So originally like this, you're gonna have here, you're gonna have here, you're gonna have this shape here and here, right? But the red rectangular shapes have been subtracted from the during the design development process. Okay, so another more than one rule can be applied to a shape grammar to produce design. So different shapes may be used. I think I've mentioned about this last week and also just now. Um, this is not a subtraction rules. Sorry, this is this is a subtraction rules. Okay, the subtraction rules. At the same time, you only use one shape where you enlarge the shape. Okay, shape rule number one. So this number one is basically the original size of the square. And then you apply rule number one, where it specifies that you add, you also add another square, but in a bigger size, okay, a scale up version of the initial object. So in rule number two, basically you already have this arrangement. You have two squares, the bigger one and the small one, and then the rule specify that you remove the smaller square, then just leave the bigger square. Right. So during the design development process, you can see you start off with the smaller square, and then you apply rule number one, you get the bigger square on top of the smaller square, and then you apply rule number two. So you remove the smaller square and you maintain, just leave the bigger square, and then you apply again rule number one, where you add even an even bigger square, right? And then you apply rule number two again, where you remove the smaller square. But as I mentioned earlier, if you do this, basically you're not going to create any design or any interesting design, because in the end you're just going to keep enlarging the square, right? Keep enlarging the square and then removing the square, keep enlarging again and then removing the now bigger square, and so on, right? But in the end, the only thing that you're going to produce is a square. Okay, so I don't see any points of doing that. So the purpose of this is basically just to give you an understanding of how the rules can be applied. Okay, so it can be applied to any matching shape. So because in the shape rule, it didn't mention the size, the actual dimension of the square. So it didn't mention this is 1 cm by 1 cm, and then this is 2 cm by 2 cm. No, so there's no such thing. So as long as it is a square, right? So it doesn't matter how big the square is. So you can see it from the design development process. So initially is the same size. You can say that it's the same size as the one specified in the shape rule. But then after you have applied the rule again and again, so now it becomes bigger, but you can still apply the same rules, okay, to the bigger square. Okay, so now the size here is different from here, but because it is a square similar to this, then you can still apply rule number one, right? So again, for this shape grammar here shown in this page, to make it a more interesting grammar, you need to add at least um, another rules. Say for example, the third rules. Say the third rule is okay, this is rule number one, rule number two, rule number three. Let's say something like, so you have a square, you add a square like this. So you can imagine in the design development process, you start with a square, and then first you apply the third rules, right? So you don't have to follow the sequence. You don't have to start with rule number one and then rule number two and then rule number three. That it doesn't work that way. So as long as it is similar, the shape is similar. So now you can see that between rule number one and rule number three, the object on the left, okay, so this object and this object It's the same. So as long as you have this in the development process, you have a shape similar to the one on the left here, then you can apply the rule. You cannot apply the rule number 2 because it is not like that. Okay, it is not like this. Okay, unless if you have the 2 squares, then you can apply it. But in this case, rule number 3 is a single square like this. So you start off with rule number 3, you apply rule number 3, you get that, and then maybe you apply again rule number 3. So you add here, and then only you want to apply rule number 1, right? So you apply rule number 1, you add the bigger square here. So basically you apply rule number 1 to this here, this shape here, right? And then you also apply rule number 1. You can also apply rule number 1 to this smaller square here. So now it becomes like this. But the only thing you need to bear in mind is the scale factor. So for example, like maybe, okay, this is the original size. Let's say 1 times 1. So this is, the scale factor is what? Be 2 times, 2 times bigger than the original shape. So this is 2 times 2. So it doesn't matter how big the shape that you generate in the design process. For example, like after you overlap the shapes, so let's say the smaller square shape is just maybe 0.5 times 0.5. So if you want to, maybe I show a bigger example. Okay, let's say here just now. So this one here. Okay, so let's say you start from here, and then you apply rule number 1 here just now. Okay, so here, let's say this is just 0.5 times 0.5. So if you want to apply rule number 1, then you need to multiply 0.5 with 2. Okay, so the scale factor should be 2. So the scale factor of 2 is 2 times 0.5 is basically 1. So you're going to get back a square in the same size as this, more or less lah. I mean, I'm just saying, it's not really accurate. So something like that. And then along the way, after you have so many overlapping square shapes, then only you apply rule number 2, where you remove some of the bigger the squares. So let's say, for example, this one here, you have the outer line there. So you want to remove, let's say, this part, something like that. Okay. All right. Another example of multiple rule, or two in this specifically 2 rules shape grammar, because you only have 2 rules. So multiple, maybe if more than two rules, you can call it multiple rules, 3, 4, and so on. Right. So in the previous shape grammar projects done by some researchers, it went up to like 50 rules. Okay, even the one that I did in my previous study, I think it goes, I can't remember, I think about that, about 50 rules. But that one is different story. So I'm going to get to that in the coming weeks. Okay, so let's look at this shape grammar, the design development process. So you have 2 rules. Rule number 1, you have a square, and then you add, you rotate the square, and then you add on top of the initial object. So you get that. And then the second rule, you have the same square, and then you add to the corner of the initial shape. So during the design development process, you apply the rule number 1. to the initial object. So this is initial object. You apply rule number 1. Say A is like this. Okay. So you apply rule number 1, you get that. Right? And then here, so how do you think I get this? Okay, so basically by looking at the square in this way, then I added that shape. And then how did I get this? I similar to the one shown in the shape rule. So look at it from that position, and then you get that. So only after this I apply rule number 1. Right? So right from the beginning I applied rule number 2, rule number 2, rule number 2. Then only I applied rule number 1. Okay. So after I applied rule number 1, so basically I just added the diagonal square shape to all the matching shapes, right? So basically, if you look at it carefully, so after you applied the rules up until this stage, so eventually you will create another square right in the middle, right? So initially there's no square, right? But after you have completed the loop here, so you will create a square right in the middle. So even you can also apply rule number 1 to that square shape in the middle. But I just show you the rule that I applied to the 4 squares, but in a different possibility, different design. You can also add rule number can also add rule number 1 to the one in the middle, like that, right? Okay, understood? So from there, basically, if you do it correctly, so if you do it correctly, okay, you add this shape, the red colored shape here. So you would create like a smaller square here, 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 where you can continuously apply the rules. Rule number 1 to the smaller square as well. Okay, then you're gonna get a different variety, right? So there are many possibilities that you can get. Or if not, then from here you may just proceed with. So now because the shape you have a diagonal square shape like this. So if you apply rule number 2, you can also apply rule number 2 to the diagonal shape. So for example here, so when you apply the rule, you're gonna add another square here. Okay, something like that. If you apply here, you're going to create square here, right? If you apply here, I'm gonna add. So if you apply here, so you're gonna get here, apply here, gonna add here. Okay, something like that. So in the end, you would create another variety of the design in the same language. Right? So you can explore more on that. Okay, another example of shape grabber, 2 rules shape grabber. So this time I use different shape. Okay, so the first one is square, and then the second shape is equilateral triangle. Okay, I like to use the equilateral triangle because it doesn't matter how you look at it, okay, from different orientation, you will still get the same object. So you can apply the rules differently. Okay, like this one, you have a square. The initial shape is a square, and then the rule specifies that you add the triangle to near to one corner of the square, left side. Okay, left side. Actually, I got this from the internet also. But for me, this is also not really a good um, rules now. It's kind of difficult to work with, right? Because in the end, you need to roughly know, okay, so what's the distance between the top of this triangle here and this corner. So you need to have that kind of information to if you want to work with this kind of rules. So you need to be sure of the exact position of the triangle in relation to the square, right? Maybe you move this a few centimeters away, and then here also same, you move away from the center of this line here. So you need to have that kind of information. So maybe this is like 1 cm, it's not 1 cm, something like that. Okay. But because this is not done by myself, but the reference point that I use is basically, so this side here, vertical. So this it should and which is parallel to this side of the square. Right? And then the second rule, you have a triangle, but actually it doesn't have to. You don't have to draw the rules in that manner. Okay, so when you draw the triangle, the rule related to the triangle, it can just be something like. So you just do it properly. You just draw it properly. Okay, and then even myself so confused with the with the rules. Sorry. I think it should be this way. Okay, something like that. Okay, so it doesn't matter actually. You can do it this way or this way. Basically, it's the same. It's the same rules. Okay. Right. So during the design development process, yeah, I think I've shown the different. Okay, you should start from here. So first, you can actually start with a square or even the triangle. So it doesn't matter. But if you want to start with a square, so you draw the square, then you can only start with rule number one. So in rule number one, you add the triangle. So you have this square here. Then you apply rule number one, you add this triangle. And then that triangle, you look at it from that point. So basically, you're going to create the shape here, the square, new square here. And then from this angle, you look at the new square. From that angle, you apply rule number two. You're going to create this triangle here. And then the new triangle, you look at it from that angle. You apply the rules. So you're going to create a square here. And then that new square, you look at it from that angle. You apply the rule. You create the triangle there. And then continue. So the new triangle, you look at it from that point, then you apply the rules, you're going to create that square. And then the same triangle, you look at it from different angle, you apply the rule. Um, okay, so you're going to add this square. And then finally, that square, you look at it from this angle. And you apply the rules, you get a new triangle there. Okay. Uh, that's why I say is for me it's not really a good uh, shape grammar. So I mean the choice of rules that the the person use in this shape grammar is not that interesting because in the end the pattern or the design that was created uh, doesn't really make any sense lah. So it's like kind of abstract composition, right? But maybe this kind of composition is good if you want to produce like a painting, okay? So you want to produce abstract painting using these two shapes, triangle and square. So you can simply, so rather than simply putting the shapes anywhere you like, right, you can use the rules to control the movement or the position of the squares, the shapes. Okay, understood? Right. So another example of multiple rule shape grammar. This one also um, using addition and subtraction. So the rule itself is, but subtraction is not that obvious lah, because as you can see, um, if you look at the rules, basically it is not an addition. It's not an addition, and also it's not a subtraction. Okay, so basically it's just movement. You have two rules, two different shape. So the first one is square, the second one is L shape, and the rule only specify that you just move the object. Okay, no additional shapes added to the initial shape. Like the first one, rule number one, you have a square, and then the rule specifies that you move the square from that red marks. Okay, red cross there. So you move maybe like certain centimeter or something, certain mm. You move away from the mark from the original position. And then the second rule specifies that you also move the L shape away from the original position, right? But it is still the same object. You just move the position. But in the design development process, I mean, for your information, this shape grammar was done using computer, not by me. It was, I found this on the website online. It was done by using computer programming. So this is using computer programming language. So the initial shape to start the development process is a combination of these two shapes. Okay, if you still remember last week I mentioned, so the starting shape, right, in the design development process can be different from the one specified in the rules as long as it has some kind of similar elements. So in this case, it has the L shape here, which is the similar element to this. Okay, so and also this L shape here, right? But to begin the development process, basically you can combine these two L shape to become like this. So last week I mentioned, if you still remember the rules, I show you one example using a single line. Okay, so the rule is something like this. Okay, if you still remember this, and the design development process can start with a triangle, right? So if you look at it, basically this triangle is different from a single line, but in that triangle, it has the elements, the same elements, which is the line, the three lines, right? So you can apply the rule to the three lines. So similar to this one, it is a combination of the L shape. So at least you have the L shape, which is similar to the shape stated in rule number 2. So from the beginning, you only have you don't have any other option but to use rule number 2. Okay, you need to start with rule number 2 because there is no square in here, so you cannot use this rule, right? Because this rule specifies only if you have a square. Okay, so you apply rule number 2. So what happened during the process is basically you apply, let's say you apply this to this first shape. Okay, you apply the rule to this first shape. Let's look at it this way. So let's say this is the orientation. Okay, but now you look at it from this point, this angle. So when you move, and then you apply to both actually. So, and then this L shape, you look at it from this angle. So you apply the rules to both L shape, So basically what's going to happen is you're going to move this shape here, and you're going to move this L shape down. Okay. So that's how you create this shape over here. So now you have like five squares. Then at this level, you can only apply, no, you can apply rule number 1, right? Because you have the 5 squares. But you can still apply rule number 2, because you still have this L shape here, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay, you can still have you still have this L shape here. Okay. So at this level, basically this is the first one of the option is like this. So basically what happened is you move the one in the middle here away. Okay, so you moved, so that's how the square is moved to this corner. So another option from there, what you can do is basically to further move this L shape. So it becomes like this. So this is also possible. Okay. Then from here, you can actually create different. You can develop further. So from here, basically, maybe you move um, one of the square, okay, like that, and then you further move another square. This. So you can create different variety, okay, of design. But in this case, basically, if you continue with this, all right. So okay, so from here, now you have this smaller L shape. You created a smaller L shape here, and then you apply rule number 2. You apply rule number 2. Basically, you move down the L shape to this corner, right? And then you further move the L shape down. So it becomes like this. And then finally, you have this square. Then you apply rule number 1. You move down the square. So that's how you get this arrangement. Right? Okay. So this is the why we use shape grammar to create design. So basically, to come up with a variety of design, like multiple possibility of design in the same language. So if you choose this path, where you move this L shape, everything, then you get this. But if you choose a different way, right, you use different, you apply the rule to a different shape, you can get this, and then you get this. Okay, so there are many more other ways that how you can manipulate, right, the design, how you can apply the roles to different shapes, okay, to create a more interesting design. Okay, understood? Okay, so uh, that's it, basically, the lecture. Um, I hope you understand the application of addition and subtraction rules, and then yeah, and other things that you need to remember. So okay, so for the second exercise, so this is second exercise. You need to submit together with the first and the third exercise on week 6. Is it? Okay, so this is a two rule shape grammar. Multiple rule shape grammar. You have rule number 1 and rule number 2. Sorry. Sorry, the exercise is this one. Right, sorry about that. I think this one I just I'm going to share another example, step by step process of creating a design using these two rules. So if you have these two rules, how you're going to apply it. So you can choose. You can choose either to start with a square or a triangle. So, but I like to start with this triangle. Right. If you do the shape grammar on your own, basically you don't have to show the arrows lah. Right. So right from here, you can straight away apply the, as long as and you understand lah. So you can apply the rules. First you apply here, right, and then apply again rule number one. You add a square here, apply again rule number one, you get here, right? That's it. So you cannot apply rule number one anymore because you already applied the rules to all the three sides. So now you can only use rule number two to further develop the design. Okay, so rule number two, you can choose where you want to apply the rules. So maybe uh, you want to apply here, here, and here, right? Then from there, apply again rule number one, right? That's what you're gonna get. So if you continuously applying the rules again and again, right? So you're gonna get one of the possibility. This is not according to the scale. So in the end, you're gonna get something like this. This is not to scale. Okay, something like this. Right. So this is design number one. Okay, design number two, you can start with a square. You start with a square, then you apply the rule again and again. Okay, so that's it. You cannot apply rule number two anymore. So you need to apply rule number one. You can apply here. Maybe you apply to the same side of each of the triangle. Okay, something like that. So this can be considered as one of possible design, right? If not, then maybe you add here, here, oops, here, here, here. Right. So that's another design. Or you want to use the rules alternately. Yeah. So first you start with square, and then you apply the rules to this side, then you apply to this side. Okay. Then you apply to this side, apply to this side. Something like that. Okay. So all right. So okay, now is the exercise, the second exercise. Right. So exercise two. Um, yeah. Actually, the one at the bottom here, the description and submission on week 8. The one is this is an old slide. So I forgot to edit the slides. But submission is actually together with you refer the previous exercise one. So you refer the description at the bottom of exercise one. If I'm not mistaken, the submission is on week 6, and then the format is soft copy. So soft copy should be composed in A4, is it? something like that. But it's similar to last week. Should be similar to last week. So later on, I will edit this first before I post um, the slides on Teams. Right. So okay, the task is to produce 5 interesting design using the following rules. So it's not following grammars, following rules. Rule number 1, but the good thing is in both rules, it specifies that the additional object is the same as the initial object. So in the end, you just play with the equilateral triangle. So it's very easy to work with because it doesn't matter how you look at it. Okay, from any angle, from any orientation, you can apply the rules, right? But you need to be careful, especially on rule number 2, because there is a specific position where you need to apply, you need to add the new shape. Okay, so it has to be. Okay, so basically what I did here is you take the perpendicular line from this line. You take the midpoint of this line, right? So the midpoint of this line and midpoint of this line, and then you draw a perpendicular line. Then you get the crossing line is the point where the corner of the new triangle should be placed. Right? If you use AutoCAD, then it's going to be quite easy. So you can just simply copy the object. But if you do it manually, I think you don't have to be very precise. As long as it looks something like this, it's okay. But I don't want you to do like maybe like this. So this is different. I don't want you to do that. So please, as much as possible, even especially if you use manual drawing, try to put it where it should be, something like that. Okay, this one is wrong. This one is okay. Okay, so using these two rules, okay, produce 5 interesting design. So you don't have to show the development process, like you don't have to show the arrows, right? It is sufficient you just show the 5 complete designs, 5 complete arrangement, right? Something like the previous one that I showed, but I've just I only showed 3 three designs. That's why you need to produce 5 designs. Okay, the keyword here is interesting. So you need to make sure that it is interesting. So don't simply randomly use the rules. All right. Okay, so I think that's all for today. If you have any question, you can always WhatsApp me, and try to explain. All right. So, yeah, I think that's all. Okay, I'll see you next week. Bye.